Is this the textbook way of doing this? No. Textbook, take it all off, start again. That is what's causing it. There's springy bits in the wall. This wall had everything wrong with it. It was bent and out of shape. It had loose plaster that was springing around, and it had paint that was flaking off. We've come to help a lovely lady. She's told me that every time she's decorated, this wall has caused nothing but issues. It doesn't matter how many times she fills these cracks, they just keep coming back and it flakes off. So we're gonna get to the bottom of why it's happening. This is a rental property owned by a lady called Michelle, a friend of my wife's. Michelle bought a new house many years ago, but struggled to sell this house. At the same time, a family member needed somewhere to live. So by default, Michelle became a landlady. Okay, what we're finding is that there's loads of areas where the paint isn't adhered. But look, see this? What you've got here is lime wash paint. See my hand, nice and clean? See all the white dust on it? That's why this layer of paint isn't sticking to this. Now, she told me that when she did paint this years ago, she washed this off with sugar soap. But evidently, there's still little bits that remained. Now look here at this bit. This is slightly worse. You can see that this is still thick on. Look how blue that is. Look what it was over there. She has done a good job of washing it off. But see here, again, look at the hand. That is what's causing it. Right, we've checked all the wall. Everywhere seems quite solid. Reese is going to carry on scraping off any loose paint that he can on the flaking areas. But in the meantime, I've been checking where's loose on the wall, where's springy, where's the plaster blown. And ultimately, this lath and plaster wall only seems to be in this section. Now, I'd imagine that's because over the years, there's been a bed there, and that's where people have been knocking into, getting round the bottom of the bed or whatever else they've been getting up to in the bed. But you know, don't forget this house is probably 120 years old. Everywhere else is good and sound. For such a small area of springy plaster, we're going to try and salvage it. If we cut that part out, it's got horsehair in it. The way lath and plaster works is it's tied in. What's happened here is if we start taking plaster out, we're going to weaken a bigger area. So I'm going to try and salvage this bit. Now, you're probably wondering why the holes, but you'll see why in just a minute. Another option, we could have plasterboarded over this wall, but it would have meant extending the sockets and the light switches, removing the skirting board and picture rail, and having them replaced, which ultimately costs more money for more tradesmen. The springiness is caused by the plaster breaking off on the back of the laths. If I spray foam adhesive that's going to touch the back of the laths and the plaster and fill the gap in the void between the stud wall, that's going to make it solid again. Is this the textbook way of doing this? No. Textbook, take it all off, start again. I mean, ideally go again with lime plaster and horsehair it and all the rest of it. Here's the situation. The customer hasn't got endless pots of money. She said to me, can we just make it to look nice so I can paint it? Yeah, there's more than one way to skin a cat. So, is this the right way to do it? No. Will it work? Yes. Is it the best way? It'll be okay for what she wants. So, we're gonna foam here, like I have done. Once that's set, that'll take all the springiness out the wall and it'll be nice and firm again. We're gonna continue getting as much of this loose paint off. So if there's any bits of lime wash paint that she's left on, we'll be able to get down to that and deal with that situation. And then we'll be able to skim over this wall. All these cracks that have appeared, I mean, in a building that's 120 years old, you'll expect little cracks, but we've got a little solution for that as well. Right. All this is nice and solid now, and we're just going all over with duct tape. And this is how we can find if there's any more loose flaking paint. You just use the duct tape to get it off. A roll of this is going to cost you about £3, but you can go all over the wall and get as much loose paint as you possibly can. You can go over the wall as much as you can with a scraper, getting any flaky bits off, but really, to find any loose bits of paint, this duct tape test is the best way. A roll of duct tape costs £3. I mean, if it finds all the loose bits, then that's better. You don't want to find the loose bits with the weight of plaster, because then you've got bits falling off. There you go. Once we got as much paint off as we could find, I then went all over the wall with the sharp edge of the trowel to take the foam off. The sharp edge does a great job at cutting through the foam. Okay, so the bits where Michelle didn't wash as well, and it's got the chalky, dusty paint, this stuff, we could wash it better, or an easier way of doing it is just use this stabilising solution. So this paint is lime wash paint. What you'll find, almost every building that has got lime plaster will usually have lime wash paint in it somewhere. It's like plasterer's kryptonite. Whenever you heard of a plasterer doing a ceiling and it falling down, it's because it's stuck to dust. This stabilising solution soaks into it and binds it all together. You'll be able to buy this from the link in the description. We're going to leave this to dry now, these patches. Whilst that's drying, we're going to address these cracks. Now, one way we could do it is go around and get little bits of scrim and stick them on over all the cracks before we SBR the wall. Or there's another way which does it a lot better, a lot stronger, and a lot faster. So let's get into it. This is rendering mesh. Now the only difference between rendering mesh and normal scrim is it's a heavier gauge, it comes on a bigger roll, and it's not self-adhesive. Apart from that, it serves exactly the same purpose. Any little drips like this, as you go in, just wipe them off. The good thing about this is, literally, as soon as you finish getting the wall on, if you got to the start where you started, it's tacky. It's literally give that another 5 minutes and it's ready to start plastering. Doesn't take long at all. If that was PVA, you could be sat here now for 2 hours waiting for that to dry. Just gonna roll these bits back up and leave them ready at the bottom of the wall where they're gonna go. So that when we get the first coat on, we can quickly just whiz them up and bed them into the plaster. So we've just filled up some water and come back, and as you can see, that's dry. Literally, it takes 10 minutes to dry and you're good to go. Now, the idea is, this mesh, rather than putting little bits of scrim on the wall, we're going to bed that mesh in. Now, if you wanted to kill two birds with one stone, you could stick the mesh on whilst you're rolling the SBR on. You simply hold the mesh up to the dry wall, and then with your roller with the SBR on, just roll over the surface of the mesh. And what it does is, it sort of glues the mesh to the wall as you're going, and it stays in place. It's quite fascinating, really. Now, some guys don't like this because the mesh isn't encased in plaster, and they say there's no plaster behind the mesh holding it still. But with the same thinking, how does your self-adhesive scrim work? Now, the thing is, they get this thinking from when they're encasing mesh in render, and the manufacturers stipulate your mesh needs to be in the top third of the render to stop cracks. but finishes that thin, it wouldn't really make a difference. Take a little bit, go in neat, like that. The idea is just to get this wall covered as fast as possible. When I say fast as possible, I don't mean I'm going to start going like the clappers. I just mean I'm not going to focus too much on trying to get the wall perfectly neat for the first coat, because the mesh is going to be going into it and I'm going to be smoothing over it anyway. Now, before Michelle had managed to get hold of me, she had another plasterer do work for her downstairs. When it came to looking at this wall, his recommendations were that it all needs to be ripped off. Now, Michelle wasn't keen on this idea, mainly because she didn't want all the extra mess. Ripping it off would make dust throughout the house. It would take longer and cost a lot more money. It's not only this wall, there's a few other walls that need a bit of attention. So, just with a little bit of outside the box thinking, we came up with a way she could still get a great job with a great finish, but for a fraction of the cost and hassle. Now, people always ask me about the angle of the trowel when you're applying the plaster and how much pressure. The pressure thing is really difficult for me to explain. The best way I can sort of say it is you just know if the plaster's scraping, you're pressing too hard. If the plaster's leaving, like, you know, if it's dripping down the wall, you haven't pressed hard enough. It's sort of like holding a kid's hand when you're crossing a road, you know, how hard you squeeze. You can't really explain it. It's just hard enough so that they don't slip through your fingers and you're not crushing the hand. Now, the angle, that's different. You can put it on like this and it's sort of that angle. So, Reese will get a close-up for you now. I always start half up on the wall and then dip down once, like so. And then it's just one swoop back up again. As opposed to, a lot of fellas will dip down like this and come up the wall and then down, and then they've dipped twice. Now, it doesn't seem that much when you're only doing one wall, but if you're plastering 2 or 3 bedrooms in a day, which does happen on building sites, and you're dipping twice every time, you know, you're probably doing about an extra 1,000 squats a day, which some fitness fanatics would probably say is good for you. When I was editing this video, I was in two minds whether to just skip through this whole section so it wasn't boring. But then I thought, a lot of guys always ask me what tools I use apart from my trowel to get round sockets and stuff. So I thought I'll leave this section in to show you that I genuinely don't. I just use my trowel for pretty much everything. I've got quite a narrow trowel, so getting in little gaps is quite easy with it. And if you buy a Marshalltown trowel, the toe is quite flat. So you can use the toe for plastering. The toe is the front of the trowel, by the way. You've got the blades either side, the heel at the bottom and the toe at the front. And even down the side of door casings, regardless how wide they are, if the trowel fits in, that's what I'll be using. Now, this has got quite a lot of space, so it's quite easy. But as long as it's at least 4 inches wide, my trowel will fit in it. And that's all I'll be using to put it on. Okay, now it's on. It doesn't look nothing special. I don't know if you've noticed or not, but this wall's got a curve about here. It curves this way. It's not straight, it actually curves this way here. Anyway, that causes us to leave heavier lines because the wall's got a curve in it. But it doesn't have to be nothing neat. It's just a case of getting it on. Now it's on, we're going to bed this mesh in. Now you don't want to hang around. You don't want this setting. You don't want to be taking far too long to do this. The SBR is going to work a treat to hold back the suction. It's going to give us plenty of time. But even still, we want to work efficiently. See how I've got the mesh to overlap a little bit? This bit was especially spongy around the light switch. There's another little tip for you. The mesh naturally curls. Make it so it curls into the wall. If you bed this on the other way around, when you're trying to bed it on, the top will keep picking back out again. Whereas this way it doesn't. Okay, so go into the wall like such. When you're putting new pieces of mesh on, make sure you overlap them with the last one, just so there's no little bits where the crack can appear. Oh, and the curve in the wall that I keep going on about. That's a design feature in all these houses to make the landing bigger. Okay, so you notice I haven't gone too wild of trying to get this completely covered. It's just bedded in. Now we're going to give it a tight little coat all over to fully encase the mesh, and that'll count as the first coat done. Now, I'd like to know your opinion. So far, you've seen me fix the springy plaster with the foam. You've also seen me fix the lime wash paint with the stabilising solution. And now I'm making sure that no cracks come back with the reinforcing mesh. I want to know, do you like this method? Is there anything that you would have done different to what I've done so far? See how I'm leaving these lines? That's because of that curve in the wall. Yeah, there's a better way of looking at it. Look at the skirting board and look at the floorboard. See the curve? There's no way that I can straighten that out. That is literally the shape that they have built it to make the landing bigger. Now, with that known, when I come to troweling up, I'm not going to be going this way. I'm going to be going this way more so as not to leave lines in the wall. I'll tell you something else I'd like to know as well. Tell me in the comments, if you've never commented on one of my videos, then please do now. I would love to know what you think a job like this is worth. What would you be willing to pay? Or if you're a plasterer, what would you charge for a job like this? Just general curiosity. There's nothing in this. It's not a loaded question. I just want to know roughly what you think this is worth. There we go. I don't know what that was. Okay, so that's the first coat on. And as you can see, it's sticking to my fingers, it's nice and wet. That's the touch test. If you can leave an impression in plaster without it sticking to your fingers, it's just ready for the next coat. If it's sticking to your fingers, it's still too wet. And if you can't leave an impression and you've left it too long, you better hurry up. Now, whilst it's like this, I'm gonna go over now and just flatten this in a little bit. I'm just gonna make it a little bit smoother. If I'd put it on neater, it wouldn't be so necessary to do this, but the fact that the wall is like this makes it very hard to put on neat when your trowel is straight and the wall's a bit in and out. All I'm doing now is just nipping over the wall and getting out any big lines. I'm just going to go all over it and make sure the whole thing is nice and smooth. Because what I want to do, I want to leave this first coat of plaster to really firm up before I put the second coat on. Okay, first coat on, mesh in, flattened in. We've got to leave this now. We want this to really firm up. We want to get it to the point where you think you're almost going to lose it because it's set too much. By doing that, by letting it firm right up, it's the same principle when I skim over an Artex ceiling. It stops any of that bleed through. Any of these little squares, it stops them coming through because they'll be almost set in the first coat. And then the second coat will be a lovely little smooth coat over the top. So we'll give it about 15-20 minutes. Okay, I've been checking this. I can still leave an impression of it, but it's not sticking to my fingers. It's firmed up quite a lot. So we're going to mix up some fresh stuff now and give this a nice second coat. Now this goes on like a dream now. Once you've applied your first coat and flattened it in and give it time to pick up, second coating is literally a pleasure to do. It's like plastering over the perfect background. It's always nice to skim over, and I use exactly the same method when I'm plastering over Artex ceilings. I put the first coat on, I flatten it, and I let it pull right in before the second coat it, and that way none of the pattern bleeds through. Now the reason I've done it on this is because I don't want the mesh showing through either. I don't want the little squares. Like, the mesh doesn't literally come out the wall, but what happens is, because the plaster is on different thicknesses in between the mesh, it sort of, the pattern transfers through. It's very hard to explain, but imagine plaster's like a bit squishy, like foam, if that makes sense. Like, you can squish it, so in the mesh it like presses out. And that's what we call bleed through of the pattern. You have exactly the same thing on Artex ceilings, and that's why flattening them off and letting them almost set is ideal, because then when you put the second coat on, you haven't got that squishiness, that plaster pushing back out in the thicker areas. Now I know what you might be thinking. If it's so much nicer to flatten the first coat off and let it pull in before you second coat it, why don't you always do it that way, Kirk? Why don't you always plaster like that? And in truth, the reason is, it takes more time and more effort. You've got to wait for it to pull in, which takes longer, and you've got to go over the whole wall flattening in, which is more effort. Now, when it comes to plastering, you want to get the best possible results with the minimum amount of effort as fast as possible. That's how you make money. A little bit thick, this stuff, but it's no bother. I usually like it a bit wetter, but just because of the shape of this wall, with it being in and out so much, old houses, it's the thing with old houses, and you could say, well, you could straighten that wall. We could take the skirting board off, we could build it out an inch, but I mean, every single wall in the house is the same, so unless they take the whole lot back off the brick and start again, it's a bit pointless. You know, if the customer doesn't want it, they're not that fussed, then just work with what you got. Okay, we're just flattening in, and I'm cross-troweling. Remember I said to you, I'm going to go this way when I'm troweling up, because the wall's curved there. If I went up now, I'd start to put a big groove in the wall, a big line. So I'm just going to run across it instead. So she's just had this installed. It's literally brand new, and we're told don't take it off because the alarm will start going off. So It's staying where it is. We're plastering it in. This is now the first wet trowel. So count the stages up to now with me. We got the first coat, we put the mesh in and we finished the first coat. Then we flattened it in. Then we give it the second coat. Then we flattened it in. Now this is the first wet trowel. And what I mean by that is the plaster, the trowel is going to drag a little bit on the plaster. So we just lubricate it a little bit by flicking water. It's the first wet trowel. That'll glide over nicely. A little bit of water. After this, we'll give it a second wet trowel. And then all it needs is a polish. Once it's finished. Now, if you're trying this at home and you're struggling and you're wondering, why is it not looking as easy when I'm doing it? It's more than likely because you've got a new trowel. You really, really struggle to leave a nice job with a brand new trowel. Okay, I love my missus, right? Basically, anyone that's a friend of my missus gets the job done. Because what will happen is, I've been doing this full time for 25 years, but since the age of 11. And after a while, you get a good reputation, you know, and you sort of get to be able to pick and choose which jobs you do and which ones you don't, unless it's a friend of my wife's. And then, like things like this, usually, around this area, I know the house types. I know which houses are nice to work in, which ones aren't. These lovely houses, I just know the age of them. I know they've got issues, you know, and usually I just go, I just leave it, you know. I'm a bit busy. I do something else, pick a nicer job. But my wife, she's like, no, go and do it. It's for such and such. Yep, he'll do it for you. I'll get him to call you. I get roped into all sorts. Okay, second wet trowel. If you don't want to flick the water, you can just brush it on like so. And this is coming down really nice now. You can see the dark patches. See where the plaster's on thinner because the mesh is in there? It starts to get little dark patches, that's where it starts to set. So when they start appearing, we know it's not going to be much longer. We're going to give it nice. Second wet trowel. And within 10 minutes, we'll be polishing this wall, we'll be finished. There you go. I'm trying to show you how curved that wall is so you can see. It's not a fisheye lens, that is that shape. Let's see if you can see it from this side. There you go. See the curvature in it? See the floorboard? That's the shape of it. I just want to mention something that's been on my mind. Landlords and landladies usually get a bad rep, don't they? And I was just thinking whilst I was doing this job, this wall with the cracks in it and the springy plaster, I think there's a lot of landlords out there that would have just painted that and not really cared about it. But ultimately, she's paid out to have this done. This is the back bedroom in the house, so chances are this will be a little kiddie's bedroom. Beautiful. Some little fella with his posters on his wall, or maybe a little sweetheart with a princess stuff dotted around, you know. Just goes to show, not all landlords treat houses just like cash cows and try and milk the tenants. There are some good people out there trying to make real nice homes for people to live in. Okay. That's it now. That feels like glass. Now, when it comes to polishing, you can keep polishing. I mean, ultimately, we can just keep going over this and closing the surface in. And you can almost get it like a mirror. But it doesn't really do anything. It's just going to get the texture of paint. So that, lovely and smooth, that's it, job done. That wall that was springy, that was crumbling, that had paint that was falling off, that was an absolute nightmare, that other plasterers turned away or wanted to knock down and start again. We've managed to fix that. in a few simple steps and save this lady a couple of £100. So that's it, job done. I'm gonna wipe down now. Give these skirting boards a good wipe down. And that is it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
Time slipping through my fingers. Can't recall all the days